an overflow crowd. We've only got about 6 seats in the back there, and we've got 150 people on live stream in here, and we can't connect. We've had one of the computers failed, and so we're going to go ahead and we will plug it in as when they get it up and going. But we're going to move ahead here in the interest of time. Again, very much appreciate you all coming, and we really appreciate this. Let me tell you very, very quickly then what our schedule and what we're going to do here today. We're going to, first of all, I want to thank all of the marvelous people who helped support us on this. The County Commission was generous and gave $1,000 to help buy some of the radios that you all have. And Hunter's Hardware, Danny Davidson, all the lights that you saw in your bag came from Hunter's, and the gloves came from Dawson's, and American Contingency gave us the balloons. Nah, that's kind of a joke, but it's okay. And the South Morgan Fire Department, of course, made this space available to us, and we really appreciate that very much. CNB also gave us some money and so on. And so we appreciate all the support from all of the good people in the county. So we're going to go very quickly through about 3 hours. And we're going to shut off the lights, and you'll be able to read this in a minute. But we're going to, Jason Hoover, who directs the emergency services for the county, is going to come and do a little introduction here. And then we're going to do an hour about what are we preparing for? What kind of situations, what kind of possibilities, scenarios, we call them. And then the second hour, Lori Marino is going to come and say, so how do we get ready? Which will say what kind of resources are there that are available? What kind of people and institutions and places where you can go in order to stock up whatever you need to do. And then the third hour, it'll be Josh Walton, our Vice President, who will take us through why communications and how it works and some of how to use the radio and what we're planning to do over the next months and years in terms of a communications network for the whole county. And so it'll be a I promise you, an interesting afternoon, and we, again, really appreciate your coming. So, Jason, come and talk a little bit, please. This is Jason Hoover.
Thank you, everybody. First, I'd like to say good afternoon, and this is a fabulous turnout. It's important to me in my job to build a community resiliency, and this is the first step in that. So we're going to talk about that later on, but I wanted to talk about a little bit what I do. I'm the emergency manager for Morgan County, which means that I help prepare for emergency events. It's about mitigation, which is kind of lessening the impact of the events, preparing for them, responding to, and recovering from. Now, with the recovery portion, I don't know how people watch the news and how familiar you are with things, but everybody has the assumption that FEMA's going to ride in on their white horse and take care of you. That's not going to happen. It's never been like that. Disasters start local and they end local. So the only thing we can do as a community is help prepare for that. And that's how we're starting that process here today. Sorry, my stuff is not working correctly now either. So a little bit what's happened over the last few years. I took this job in 2022 after the gentleman that was before me. He took another job in another county. He had started a lot of good stuff, so we just continued with that. We rewrote the emergency operations plan, which is basically our blueprint if we have a disaster in the county. That's what we fall back on. We're building some assets through grant funding, and we are working on some mitigation measures, mostly in the flooding aspect. Over the next government cycles and grant cycles take a long time, but hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll start to see a lessening of an impact on some of the flooding around town especially. So part of, building that resiliency, amateur radio and what our partners here at Morgan County Emergency Communication Network, they provide a contingency for us if all of our normal measures fail. The state has a pretty decent radio system. We can talk to Charleston off of a portable radio, standing right there with the sheriff, well, the soon-to-be sheriff. But, sometimes that stuff fails. We take the events that happened in North Carolina and Tennessee. Their systems, they weren't there anymore. Towers blew down, towns washed away. Their entire communication infrastructure was gone. And they had to rely on amateur radio and our ham radio partners in order to be able to communicate. They're still doing that to this day in various places. So, having, you said 200 radios? 200 radios distributed out, that would be huge if something like that would happen here. We're talking about 350 miles, and that could have been us. And we get 30 to 40 inches of rain in this area, and it's going to be devastating. It's an apocalyptic event. But I'm not going to dwell on that. I just wanted to introduce myself. And I've got to read this. This event is sponsored by and supported by Morgan County Office of Emergency Services. With that being said, particular views, statements, and opinions expressed by individual speakers do not necessarily reflect the official stance of Morgan County Office of Emergency Services. So there are many things in place for emergencies if everything works correctly. But what do we do when the system is not working correctly and our redundancies fail? What do we do when nothing else works? So, John, back to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So Jason will be back, and so will a number of the other leaders in the first response kind of area in the county in just 45 minutes. But first of all, I'd like to take you through a quick kind of a tour of a big picture about how you think about things like this. You should know that my background is in strategic planning and thinking about futures and so on. And so you'll see a little bit of the kind of the mechanisms about how you do that. I'm going to start by explaining to you what the Morgan County Emergency Communications Network is. MCECN was formed about 3 years ago, and we're a nonprofit. We're just like the EMS, like the ambulance guys out here, and like the fire department here. We are a part of that kind of support layer, and we have relationships that are very similar to that with the county. We have a memorandum of agreement with the county that is, we stole it from the EMS guys. And so it's almost word for word with what we have there. We are in the business of providing communications if nothing else works. If you got an ice storm or some catastrophic thing and the cell phones and nothing else works, then we are amateur radio operators. They call them hams, and for reasons nobody understands. But we're ham radio operators, and what we have is radio stations, and I'll tell you a bit about that here in a minute. We are the last resort, and we are commonly, the amateur radio community commonly plays a central role in providing communications when there are big disasters. And there's networks all around the country that are all organized just like we are in case that there's a major emergency. And this is, although it's a hobby, it's licensed by the federal government. I can't think of another hobby that's kind of licensed by the federal government, but we are. All of us are licensed, different levels of licenses, and most of us in the Morgan County Emergency Communications Network are amateur radio operators, but not all. And if this is something that's of interest to you after we get at the end of the day or during one of the breaks, then you just come over to our table over here, and we'd be happy to talk to you about being a part of our group. Ham radio operators have their own radio stations, right? And this is mine. This is what mine looks like, and I've got a tower out behind my house. And we can talk all the way around the world or around locally and everything. And so many of us have been in this since we were kids. When I was in junior high school, I got my first license. And so we've been playing with this in one way or another for a long time. But what that means is that many of the amateur radio operators have their own independent power sources and generators and other kinds of things. And that's why the system stands up and stays up, regardless of what the rest of the area. And our mission is to prepare for the unexpected. We're not first responders. We're kind of last responders. That if nothing else works, then we got to be up and running. And so we're building triple redundancy into our power systems. We're doing all kinds of things so that we have a very high likelihood that things were going to work no matter what else. And so we're establishing this last resort kind of capability. And let me just tell you, and you'll hear about this I'm sure from some of my associates, friends, later on in the day. But you remember Katrina that came over the top of New Orleans? For 2 weeks, there was no communications out of New Orleans, either into or out of, that wasn't through amateur radio. And that the hams there, we're talking to, the main kind of operator was over in Alabama, and so they could get over to Alabama, and he then would send the messages all over. And they work all the way. We work with not only the government and first responders, but with families and with businesses. I mean, if you think of a problem here, a big problem here, and you want to get some food, and you wonder how in the world Food Lion would order some food if there was no communications, they'd order it through us, and we'd try to that's the example of some of what's happened. In Helene, as Jason already mentioned, there literally are people who died up there in the last month because they didn't have any communications. And it's as important and serious as that. And that's what we're trying to do here with the MCECN, is to get on the front end of all of this. What we also do is we work very closely with Jason and the emergency response for the county. And so our network of operators are going to plug straight into the emergency operations center that he runs down next to the courthouse. And he would be responsible for kind of the management or the command of the emergency, and we will be an integral part of that kind of a process. And so this is a hobby with a purpose, I guess you could say. And so what we're trying to do today is to make the community aware of some of the highly disruptive events that might come downstream. And we want to inform you about different ways in which you can prepare for that and suggest ways that you can do that. And ultimately, and we'll talk about this at the end, we'd like to talk about doing a community communications network. If we get, for instance, 200 handheld radios, I forgot to show you my prop. See, if you don't have to have a big station. You can have a little handheld radio like the one that most of you got today. And so, if we have a network of 200 families that have radios like that, I would probably be pretty safe to argue that we would have about more radios and a better system than any other county in the country. It's just, I've never heard of any place where that is the case. And so this is very important in terms of kind of the fabric of society and the economic benefits and being able to do response and everything. And so for us, it's a big deal. I think it's for you too. And so we'll talk more about that. So let's make sure that we are all on the same page here, and that we're talking about major emergencies that are extraordinarily large. This is not a 2-day kind of thing. This is not a wreck on the bypass or, or with a truck or something like that. We're talking about big things that really stop everything down, and in particular, have a likelihood to knock out all of the communications. We're talking about a situation where the local response is ineffective. That is to say that with all the good help of all of the people who are the leaders of the services in this room, for our county, if they don't have any communications, think of it as like a big giant ice storm or a flood, like Jason talks about, where nothing is working. Well, that's where we come in and provide communications. And in particular, and the reason why this comes home to everybody is because the supply chains break down. You know what that means? It means all the chains that supply the food and the water and the fuel and the other kind of things, because there's a big disaster, they don't work anymore. And so this is not just a couple of day kind of thing where the white horse government guys show up, maybe, This is one of these things where we're on our own for a good while, and it's important to get going. And what's important here is that it's the duration of this event is uncertain, right? So you can't see there and here, you're getting a message from FEMA and they're going to show up in a week or 2 days or something. No. This is like, it's an open-ended deal, and we're going to have to figure out how to do this on our own. And that's what's important in terms of trying to think about all of this. And so let me just try to put in your mind kind of a feeling of what happens in a big situation like this. And we're talking catastrophes here. I'm not trying to get any, I don't want you to go away being afraid. And this is not about generating fear or any of that kind of stuff. This is like just being prepared. But the way you get prepared, I used to be in the military for 3 decades. And it's all about, you prepare and you think about alternatives and you train for it and so on. It's no different than that. You don't have to be afraid, and being afraid, by the way, is counterproductive. You don't think well when you're afraid. And so what you really want to do is be aware of all of these things. And so just let me give you a sense, though, of what happens, because probably almost nobody in this room has ever experienced this. Within about 2 to 4 days of a big situation like this, where everything shuts down and it's open-ended, you don't know what's going to happen. About all the stores get looted, and particularly the food stores, because there are a whole lot of people in this county, hopefully nobody in this room, who have not thought about and have not prepared, and so they're going after toilet paper or whatever they are going after. And within about 3 days, people begin to run out of food. And then it starts to turn. And you can think in your own mind about how you'd think about your own family or your own situation, that if you were out of food for about 2 days or something and you didn't know where you were going to get any more, and there was, the government wasn't coming, then things start to shift. And somewhere in the middle of that, the law enforcement gets really degraded, because the sheriff's going to, do everything he can, but there's a point in here where all of his deputies go home to their families to try to keep the families going, because that's just the way we all operate and the way we think about the priorities. Our family is first. And so in all of the planning, and there's a lot of experience that shows this is the case, is that you lose the kind of the social, the infrastructure that kind of holds things holds things together. And if you want to think about it kind of graphically, you look here, and on the left hand, here it is. If you look on here, this is an exponential curve, and this kind of relationship is exponential. You may not be familiar with this, but it starts like this. And so the availability of resources starts about this high, and then when you have an event, it starts to decrease, and it decreases rapidly and then flattens out here down in time. And here's where the fabric of society, the kind of is really the fraying of society. And it starts kind of low because it's really pretty good, and then there's a crossover point, and it starts to come unglued. There are a lot of studies, federal studies, all kinds of things that suggest and show that this is the case. And so all I'm saying is that you've got a period of time that we've all got to be prepared for in a situation like this. And there are a lot of people that are, for whatever reason, are not going to be prepared. And so there are some kind of basic emergency preparation requirements. One is that you've got to do some planning. And we're going to talk through and walk you quickly through a process here for that. Then you have to do outfitting. How do you can't do this without getting some food and water and radios and all of that kind of stuff. And so there's outfitting, and that's what Lori's going to talk about a good bit here when we're finished. And then there's organization, because think about this. The thing that brings us all together here is that we have community. We've got a social fabric. We've got a set of relationships that hold this whole community together. And if it starts to come apart, then I promise you that you're not going to, you're certainly not going to thrive in one of these situations just on your own. You got to get together and start to build relationships and support groups, and we'll talk about exactly how that happens. But there are all kinds of real life experience and examples of that in places to where the only way people survived were that they had a community together, a neighborhood group together, and so on. And then there's a little bit about training. Then you can't just have it in your head. You need to kind of try it and make it work. And so that's the kind of the basic things. And I'm going to walk you through some planning kind of things here, and then Lori will come and talk about outfitting. And so there's a kind of a major decision that gets made when you're doing planning in here, and is how likely are you to have to leave your home? We live on the top of a hill, and so it's not going to flood, and it's never going to get a flood that big. And so if you looked across the spectrum of possible kind of events, you'd say, I'm going to be in my house and I'm not going to have to go anywhere. If you've got an office down in the bottom near the run where Jason is, and the water's going to be up around your nose, then you're going to know you're going to have to leave. And you need to think, and we'll go through some examples here, and I'll give you some examples. And so you need to think about these different kind of situations what you have to do, because in a number of them, you're going to have to go somewhere else because it's not going to work in where you live and where you used to live. And so then you start to say, then if I have to leave, where would I leave? Where would I go? This is the classic bug out scenario, right? If you've heard of that, maybe, where you've got to go somewhere else for, North Carolina, whatever, where they wipe everything out, and then suddenly you're on your own and you got to go somewhere else. And so there's kind of two different ways in which you can go down this path, and one of them is staying where you are because you've got the capability to do that, and the other one is to prepare to literally. How many of you have heard about Mark Zuckerberg building a big underground place in Maui, right? You heard about that? Yeah, uh-huh. Why? First of all, why? Why is Mark Zuckerberg building? And what's he know that we don't know? We're not going to talk about that today. But that's a classic kind of high-level bug-out kind of scenario, right? That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to get a place. He's saying, I can't stay in my regular house. He's got lots of houses, but I can't stay in my regular house, and so I'm going to have to go somewhere. Where am I going to go that's going to provide an additional level of safety for me? That is a distinct possibility for many people, and it's something that you need to think about. And so here's the planning. And so first, what you need to do is you have to determine what kind of events are. might be coming downstream. And I would suggest, and there's multiple ways in which you could do this, but let me give you a set of kind of basic kind of ways in which to think about potential events. All right. I know a little bit about this. I wrote a book about it. So anyway, so one of them is scope. You think about the thing is kind of how big is it? How likely is it that it's how likely is help coming? How, you think about the big scope of it. How big is it? And again, we're back now. We're not talking about a local thing that happens on the, like I say, some guy turns over a semi on running down Washington in the middle of town. That's not what it is. It's probably not even a typical railroad derailment up on the north end of the county. This is a really big deal. And so you're trying to figure out. And so we're going to talk about it in two different ways. But first of it is scope. And then you think about the impact. What is, how fast does this thing come? And how are you prepared? And how much infrastructure is working? Because all of those things make a difference in your ability to respond, right? It's pretty obvious. And so there are some things where, if it was a big ice storm or something that you don't have to be too smart to know that 10 days from now, the ice is going to melt, right? One way or the other. It's not going to stay there forever. And so you can see a horizon on this thing. And if you live on the coast, they give you forecasts and tell you the hurricane is coming, and so you can prepare and so on. And so there's a set of variables that are associated with the impact. How big is this and how fast does it come? And then duration. How long does it last? That's one of the big problems up in North Carolina right now, is that this thing is just carrying on and haven't been able to get people in there and to deal with it, and they're still hauling bodies out of trees and things. And the longer it lasts, remember those curves? The longer it lasts, the more the system underneath starts to erode. And so those are the three possibilities: scope, duration, and impact. And we're going to talk about those as variables, and we're going to build some scenarios. We're going to build some examples of futures that we all might have to think about. And so let me just tell you that laced through the middle of all of this stuff are some really big issues that exist everywhere. And one of them has to do with electricity. Is there enough electricity? I mean, you all know that without me telling you about it, but it's worth kind of reminding you in this kind of a context that if you don't have the internet, everything stops. I mean, I don't know if you realize it, but you're not going to get any fuel for anything if the internet goes down. Every gas station stops because every pump goes through the internet. And you don't even begin to understand the pervasive nature of the internet in terms of our social and our economic structure. It's amazing. When you build these kind of scenario kind of things, in my mind, there is a line in the middle of the scenarios, and above the ones, the line defines whether there's electricity in the internet. And there's all kinds of things that you can do above that line, but if you go below that line, then you're in really trouble. And that's kind of Stone Age, taken to an extreme. It's kind of a notion of you're going back to horses and buggies and other kinds of things, and even if it's not your religion, right? So you got to have communications. If you're stuck somewhere and you're okay, you're not hurt, but you can't get any food or other kind of stuff, you got to be able to talk to somebody, or they'll never find you. And that's the role of what we're trying to do here today. And then you need food, because the food runs out in a hurry, and then everything kind of starts to move sideways, and then you need shelter, and you need water. So those are the big things that you need going through the middle of all of this. So no matter what kind of possibility that you think about. So now the good news is, and you can't read this, but I'm going to tell you what's here, and I'm going to tell you that if you are really excited about this kind of stuff, that you can come over to our table over here, and we'll show you the whole report. But this is a FEMA report. And this is the National Risk Index. And it's the National Risk Index for Morgan County, West Virginia. And these guys, you know, in the way the government works, they go through all these different kind of things and calculating the expected annual loss and calculating the social vulnerability and calculating community resilience and so on. And they, you know, they have all these bureaucrats that sit there and generate numbers and stuff. And they go through all of the different kind of possibilities, drought and storms and, you know, everything that you can think of, and they rate Morgan County based upon all of these things. And, I can't even read these. But they do this net assessment of the whole situation compared to every other county in the country. And the good news is, we are way down at the bottom. The likelihood of any of this kind of stuff happening is very, very low. I mean, we don't get hurricanes. It's unlikely that a tornado, you know, since I've lived here for 25 years, there's only kind of been one tornado that I remember. Anyway,
Plenty of fires.
a lot of fires, of course. But I grew up in Nebraska, and we had tornadoes all the time. And So the good news is this is a good place to live. That's what the good news is that you've all picked a really nice place to live. 2 mountain ranges in from the coast, you know. There's a lot of things going for us here. But nevertheless, there are these kind of possibilities, and I want to talk us through these kind of things. Now, we talked about scope. We talked about the 3 different variables, right? The way you think about this thing. And so what we're going to do in terms of scope, we're going to talk about whether a particular situation is either regional or national, okay? You got that in your mind? It's kind of constrained somewhere, defined, and what that means in the back of your mind is that there are good guys out on the outside somewhere who are trying to help, and they're going to come and they're going to try to help you. If it's a regional problem, you remember in Texas a couple of years ago when they had this giant ice storm that went down through there and shut everything down through the middle of Texas? Well, it was horrible for my friends that lived down there, but they knew that it was going to be over with and there was going to be help to come. That's a regional kind of problem. If it's a national problem, you got another problem. Because if it's a national problem, then nobody's coming, right? You got that? Everybody's got the same problem. And so their focus is all internal to try to solve their own kind of situations. And so it makes a real difference whether the problem is a local problem or whether it's a national problem. Now we talk about duration. So it could be long or it could be perpetual kind of. So we're not talking about short by definition, right? We're not talking about little things that are going to be over with in a little while. We're talking about something that's going to be significantly long, or one of these open-ended kind of things that just goes on and on. You just don't know when it's going to fit. There's a real difference in the way you think about that, because if you can see the end and it's going to be long, but you can see your way through, then you deal with it in a different way than if it is kind of open-ended and you're on your own and you don't see anything coming. And then the third one is impact. And so what I've chosen to do, would do profound or catastrophic. And so, again, we're not talking about little things. We're talking about a big deal. And it's either a profound thing or catastrophic, like it just wipes things out. It just really starts everything all over again in some kind of way. And that's clearly the case up in western North Carolina right now. I mean, that was, for those folks, it was catastrophic. They are going to start all over, however they start over. And it's not only catastrophic in physical and economic terms, it's catastrophic in psychological terms, because you have lived through some horrible kind of situation, and you're going to look at yourself and the world and your family and everything else in a whole different way. My grandparents lived through the Depression in the 1930s. And I can tell you that it affected my grandfather's life all of it. He looked at everything in through the grid, of having that experience and so that's what makes a difference. Okay, so if you take those three variables, right, scope, duration, and impact, and there's two variations on each one, and you combine them, mix them, and match them in every way that you can do that, you start to get what in my business is called a scenario. And this is just stick with me. This isn't going to hurt. I'm going to just walk you through a couple of things here, and it's pretty simple. You can make it. So if you take one of these and you say if it's regional and long and profound, we'll call that scenario A, okay? If it's regional and long and it's catastrophic, that's going to be scenario B. If it's regional, perpetual, and catastrophic, that's not very good. And that's number C. And if it's D, it's regional and perpetual and profound. It's a long time, but it's not wiped out everything. It's a national, perpetual, and catastrophic. Now, that's the worst of all cases, right? You following me? I'm going too fast? Are the words too big? I don't want to know. If it's national and long and catastrophic, it's just long. It's a big catastrophe for a while. Then that's another variation. And there's two more, national, perpetual, and profound, and national, long, and profound. Okay, so now we've got our whole set of scenarios. And what we can do is systematically start to walk our way down through each one of those and say, all right, so what kind of things would those be? And then the next step is say, so what do you do about them? That's the kind of the classic way in which you look at these kinds of things. So let's do this, and I'll do this, and again, just stay with me. This won't be long. So if it's regional, long, and profound, that would be like a major ice storm where there was no electricity, okay? Think about it. It's regional, it's here. It's not a national ice storm, right? And it's going to be long. It's not perpetual because it'll be over with. The sun's going to shine here in a while. But it's profound. I mean, it just wipes everything out. So that's one thing. A B1 is where it's regional and long and catastrophic. That would be like a tornado. Some giant tornado comes through the eastern panhandle and just wipes all kinds of stuff all out. It'd be catastrophic, but it would be long because you could rebuild because the tornado goes away, right? And so you can get yourself together and do that. Scenario C is regional, perpetual, and catastrophic. And that would be like an EMP strike. Do you know what EMP is? That's electromagnetic pulse. And what that is a type of weapon that is a nuclear weapon that is detonated up in the higher atmosphere and the elevations and altitudes. And what it's done, it's designed not to blow things up, but to send a big pulse of electricity out. And when that big pulse of electricity goes out, what it does is it essentially fries all of the electrical things, the grid, all your computers, everything that's down below. It's called an EMP pulse, and it's kind of the worst of all worlds. I mean, because nothing works, and it doesn't work for a long time because you've got to rebuild it, and you've lost. Think your way through this scenario a little bit. If you get one of those things happen, you've knocked out all of your manufacturing capability. You just wiped a lot of stuff out. And so it takes a long time to get the whole system going back together. Now, what happens here, and what happens in a number of these scenarios, is if you got a big enough kind of event like that, and it hits Washington and Baltimore, what you know is that there are a whole lot of people running out of that town trying to get somewhere where they think they can find some food or whatever it is, and they're going to be coming down Interstate 70. And so there's some distinct advantages to living here, and there's some interesting kind of vulnerabilities associated with that as well. And they show up here in a couple of these scenarios. If you have a regional, perpetual, and profound one, it's like Foreign attack. If you're watching the news and things, they're talking about all these people coming over the border, and they're all military age, and they're getting in and infiltrating, and they're going to, start some guerrilla war within the United States. That's it. Foreign attack from inside of the country. And so it's it wouldn't be everywhere, right? They certainly wouldn't start in Berkeley Springs or Morgan County. I mean, they'd start in the big cities or wherever they would. But it would be for a long time. You wouldn't know how long when that was going to fix, and it'd be pretty profound. And so that's an example of that. If it was national and perpetual and catastrophic, this is the big one, is like a big solar flare that comes out of the sun. How many of you are kind of familiar with that idea? Can you raise your? Yeah, most of you know what I'm talking about. These coronal mass ejections that come out every once in a while, and there are plenty of people who are smart people who are doing the research to say sometime in the next couple of years it's likely to have one of these for lots of reasons. But in any case, it's a serious kind of possibility. Long and national and catastrophic. So it's national, it's all the country, it's going to take a long time to be catastrophic. I've got U.S. Civil War, okay? There are a lot of smart people. I'm in the futures business, and so I follow some people who are very sophisticated in their ability to put together all of the different contributing factors and look at what the likely outcome is. And they're saying that from 2025 to 2027, I mean, this is a computer modeling program that has never been wrong in 40 years. So you ought to think about it at least. And what it says is that from 2025 to 2027, there's a global civil war. That's not just in the United States, that's everywhere. And what it means is, in general, there's an uprising of the people against the governments all over the place. If you follow the news at all and see all the pictures, you've got hundreds of thousands of people on the streets in Tel Aviv and in Paris and, all over the world who are rioting against their government in one way or another. And so you can see the possibility of that might happen. If that happened, it would be national, it would be long, and it would really be catastrophic because a lot of the supply chain things wouldn't work. So if you had a national perpetual and it would be profound, it'd be like a nuclear war because nuclear war isn't going to drive, they're not going to drop a nuke on Morgan County. I mean, that's not in there. I was in the military, I can assure you. They will not do that. But they will do it on Washington, D.C. So again, now you've got all these people coming out of Washington or whatever other major areas are. And so we get the byproduct of that. And so that would be a big problem. If it was national, long, and profound, it would be like, interestingly, many of you haven't thought about this, is if diesel fuel became unavailable. There are a number of very interesting scenarios about for any of a number of reasons why refineries are moving offshore and other kind of stuff where you would have an inability to get diesel fuel. And let me tell you, everything runs on diesel fuel. Everything, and that includes Elon Musk's electric cars, because all of the parts that go to making his electric car come from trucks that carry him on diesel fuel. And if there isn't any diesel fuel, everything stops in a hurry. I mean, and if you were playing the red team on the other side and trying to figure out how do you bring this country down, boom, that's one of the ways to do it really quickly. So that would be long, national, long, and profound. So there you've got your 8 different kind of scenarios. Now, one more step, and then I'll get away from all of this kind of strategy kind of stuff. So if you take each one of the scenarios and you say, so now what are the implications? What would that mean to us? Well, let's go through them quickly. So if you had a major ice storm, you would have no power or heat, and if you didn't have any power and heat, you wouldn't have any light, you wouldn't have any fuel, you wouldn't have communications and food and sanitation. You would be able to shelter in place because it wouldn't knock your house out, but you'd be limited to whatever food you had stored. And I say FEMA is alive. Now, that's a kind of a notional thing to just say the government may come, they're out there, maybe. And so that's a scenario A, okay? And so the scenario B is regional, long, and catastrophic. That's the tornado that levels the eastern panhandle. Again, you'd have no power and light and communications thing, but you wouldn't have any shelter in this case, presumably, in this scenario. And so you'd have to immediately evacuate, and you'd only have a go bag, and we'll tell you about a go bag here. And FEMA would still presumably be alive. I don't know whether they'd come or not, but they'd be alive. And so if it was regional and perpetual and catastrophic, this is the electromagnetic pulse that went off, right? And there are a number of kind of scenarios about how they do that, but very few of them have necessarily taken out the whole country. It's kind of like they're kind of regional. They'd be focused on what they would do. So if it was the case, then it would be regional. And in the area, again, you'd have no power, heat, light, communications, or sanitation. You would be able to shelter in place. You'd have a large number from the city and local area searching for food and coming out this way. All right? So here we go. Number D is foreign attack from the inside. Well, there's no, you would be no certainty about strangers. It would really change the way we all live because you'd suddenly start saying, wait a second, who infiltrated this meeting, right? Where did they come from? You'd change your whole kind of sense of how you think about things. You'd have degraded supply chains. You'd have security and no security from the government. And you'd have, guaranteed, again, the exodus from the city. You'd have degraded government because you got an attack. You got an internal war going on, right? So the things aren't working the way they are. And even if they are not destroyed, they work less effectively. And you have militias start to emerge in this one. And key facilities are targeted, and so you get these random kind of explosions and stuff that are going on. And so here's number E, national, and it's perpetual and catastrophic. There's a solar flare that hits the Earth. So that's the kind of the worst of all cases, in which you've got nothing works. And no government, no nothing. And you have to shelter in place, and you're limited to stored food. And FEMA is not alive, and it's chaotic, and it's a return to the 1800s. I have a friend of mine, Jim Kunstler, some of you may have heard of him, who writes a rather influential blog, and he has written a book about how life would be if all we lost electricity and you always went back to the 1800s and everybody had a horse and tried to deal with that. It's a great novel. It's very interesting. And so here's number F is the U.S. Civil War one. And here's the infrastructure's degraded. It's not eliminated because it'd be sporadic where things would go. And supply chains would be irregular. It'd make everything slow down, and you wouldn't be able to get parts for your car and different kind of things like that. And many businesses would fail, just like COVID, and cities would be falling apart. The worst place to live in the context of any one of these events is in a big city, I promise you, is that the supply chains are all very short in the big cities. And so those folks all think their food comes from the grocery store, right? And they haven't figured out that there are farmers on the other end, and there's trucks and distributors and all these kinds of things that are coming. And so that's what we're talking about here. Cities just start to fall apart. Limited food, no effective FEMA. Aggressors are in the area. It's a civil war, after all, and so you don't know nobody's wearing uniforms in this one, so you don't know who's on first. And many threats to your family. And so everybody hunkers down and starts to get defensive. And if you think of the psychology of all of that. Just two more. National, perpetual, profound. A nuclear war, and you get an evacuation out of town. Well, In this one, you've lost a lot of stuff, but you can shelter in place. You're limited to what food you've got, and there's no outside help, and so you're kind of on your own. And here's the diesel fuel one where none of the usual stuff works, and you're going to shelter in place, and you're limited to what kind of storage food. So you can start to get a sense of the kind of spectrum, the different kind of possibilities associated with all of this. I've already gone through and told you about the kind of the degradation path that happens here. But what happens is, in the end, is that you get this acceleration toward the collapse of central society if the thing goes on very long. And that's what you really want to think about here, because and what we can plan for, because we can do a lot of things. Now, Lori's going to talk a lot more in depth about this kind of thing, but let's talk. I want to hit the high points about outfitting, because you can't get from here to there in these kinds of situations if you don't prepare. That's what this is all about. And the way you prepare is you start thinking about food and water and electricity. Remember that list I gave you? Well, one of the things you need to think about, and this is no big trick question or anything. If any of you are Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, then you know that it's part of your religion to have a year's worth of food at least. And so there are this kind of preparation is no kind of surprise, but it requires, for those of us who are really quite interested in feeling things happening that we've never seen before in our lifetimes and wondering about the future, then what it needs is what we're trying to do is give you a kind of a systematic kind of way to think about this. And how do you do that? So number one, you want to think about, say, 90-day disaster supply kit. And again, it's things like food and water and shelter and power and all of the things we just talked about. But you want to think about it. Now you're moving it into saying, what do I need for 90 days? Now, that could be as sophisticated as this. This is a picture of somebody that's got a big basement full of food, and it's all arranged by the same things, right? All the common products, and it's got a first last in, first out kind of notion that says that the stuff that's older you eat, and then you put the new, and then you buy some more and put it in the front. So if you're doing ketchup up here, then you'd take the ketchup from the back and then you'd put the new ones in the front, or the other way around. I don't know. But the idea is you rotate the stock on a regular kind of basis, okay? Here's an example of some water tanks having water, and this is 100-hour candles, and here's a 72-hour survival kit, so that for 3 days you can have food. So there's a bunch of ways to do that. If you're interested in this, then there are a lot of different resources, but I would suggest this one, Survival Theory, a preparedness guide, and I've got a copy over here on our table over here. If you want to, in a break, take over and take a look at it. It's a marvelous. It's got all kinds of lists and all kinds of kind of a way to think about this kind of stuff. If remember the first question I said, are you going to have to leave? Can you stay, or if you have to leave? Well, if you think you might have a situation that you might have to leave, and I guess you could make up possibilities where all of us might have to leave, in one reason or another. Then what you ought to have is what's commonly called a go bag. And it's good for 3 to 5 days, and it's something that's prepackaged, and you can grab it and run. And all of you in the bag that we gave you this morning, this afternoon, has that colored checklist that we designed and we printed for you. And in that, you will see a list of kind of things that should be in the go bag. And again, Lori will talk more about that, but on our website, you will also see an expanded kind of list of the kind of things that should be in a go bag. And so we've, in a very abbreviated way, started to do that with a radio and a flashlight and some of these gloves and so on. And so there are a whole lot of kind of basic things, including a first aid kit. my first aid kit, right? So there's a lot of kind of stuff that you need to think about beforehand, because remember, there's no medical stuff. Well, we didn't talk really about that a lot, but a lot of those scenarios, there's no medical response, no hospitals, no nothing. And if you haven't gotten out in front of it in terms of medicines and first aid kind of capabilities, then it's you got a problem. Okay, so we've got what you want to do here in terms of organization. You want a family disaster plan, and this is a systematic way to kind of look through what you're going to do. And it's like flying on an airplane. Remember the brief they give you at the beginning of the airplane? They say if the oxygen masks come down, you take care of yourself first before you take care of the person next to you, right? That's the idea. You got to take care of yourself first, because if you haven't got the capability to deal with this, then you're not going to be able to help anybody else. And so when you think about this, you got to work through. We got a My Ready plan. You can go again. There's some examples over at the table. All this is on our website. If you can go there, and you can find it at myreadyplan.com. And then in organizational terms, I talked to you about the fact that you get this fraying of community and organizations and other kind of things when things happen. If you start beforehand and you start thinking about this, what you would build is what is called, in some cases, called a neighborhood protection plan. You get together with your like-minded neighbors and you say, what are we going to do if we got a problem? How are we going to prepare? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Who's going to bring this? And so on. And again, you can look at these books, Civil Defense Manual, Volume 1 and 2, and they're over at the table over here. You can take a look at them. And they walk you in great detail through the kind of ways in which you think about that kind of stuff. So now for the next 10 or 15 minutes, what I've been done, Michael, would you turn on the lights? Yeah. Has invited the leadership of our emergency response community here, and so if you guys all kind of come up here, what we've got is we've got Jason Hoover, who you've already met, and then we've got chiefs all over. We've got Chief Deputy Johnny Walter, and we got Chief Kevin Blackwell, who runs the EMS. And we've got Mark Miller, who is the chief of the fire department up here. And here comes Mark. And Marshall Yonker, who runs the 911 center. And this is not going to take long, but what I've asked them all is we're going to ask them 2 questions. And they're simple questions. So what do you do to prepare from their point of view? From professional points of view. And then secondly, we're going to say, so what do you do when nothing else works? And so we're going to start with Jason, get the official high-level perspective.
Okay. So the first thing that people can do, just stay aware of weather in their surroundings. So kind of know what's going on around you at all times. Look at the weather forecast, know if they're calling for winter storms or flooding, like that. There's hazardous materials that go up and down our roads, so they can affect you in your home. It's not there yet, but eventually we're going to have a map on our county website that kind of gives you zones and circles. If you live inside of any of those, it's going to be very good for you to sign up for our emergency public information, which is Everbridge, and that link is on our county website. It's a subscription system, so you have to be signed up in order to get those alerts. And most of those are going to fall down to 522 corridor or flood zones, anything like that. Let's see here. Made some other notes. We also will put out public information on social media and then our local radio station. So Facebook, myself and Marshall work well sharing stuff on both of our Facebook pages. Have a disaster kit. The official answer is have 72 hours. but it depends on where you live, and what's going on. So, have at least 72 hours that you can, kind of maintain yourself at your house. If you live a little further from town, you may want to have 96 hours. You may want to have a week. You may want to have 2 weeks. It just kind of depends. We're pretty good in this county as far as being resilient. Everybody knows whenever the water comes up, it's going to get their house or not. And everybody knows whenever it snows that the roads are going to be slick. We do very well in that regard. Have a plan to take care of yourself, your family, and don't forget your neighbors. Us younger people, and I'm not that young anymore, but we have elderly neighbors around us, maybe people that can't do as much. Make sure you check on them whenever something's going on. If snow's coming, if an ice storm's coming, before you run to the store, maybe call over or walk over and say, hey, do you need me to pick you anything up? Are you going to be home? What can I do for you? We live in a small community, but we have to maintain that ourselves. So take care of yourself and take care of those around you.
Thank you, Jason. Give it to the sheriff. Johnny, what do you think?
Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here for this first one. What you got to have a to-go kit. You should have plenty of stuff in there. Food that won't mold. Anything like that. Water's very important. Batteries, extra batteries, way to charge your phone, keep your car battery charged up. You can use that to charge your phone if you're near the car. Have a meeting place for your family and also a meeting place for your community. If you're in one area, say South Morgan here, if everybody can come to the fire station and help each other, that's great. And also don't forget, any disaster brings out the best and the worst of people. So there will be people around trying to take what you saved. And they might not be from your community, but they will come here. You see it all the time in, say, Florida when the hurricane comes through, the looters come. So protect your stuff as well within the law.
Good, thank you. Give it to Kevin.
Got to put the
This is,
disclosures on the end.
this is Kevin Duckwell, who runs EMS.
So one of the other things to have, and just medically overall, a good supply of your over-the-counter medicines, like your antiseptics, cold medicine, Benadryl. If you have an EpiPen, make sure it's good. The other one is your prescription medication. Make sure you get it refilled, and especially if you know an event's coming, get it filled early. Don't wait till you're down to the last day before you call the pharmacy to get your prescription filled. So look ahead of time. Get it filled 7 days out or before the event actually happens. The other one is know first aid, CPR, and stop the bleed. And just by knowing those basic things, you can take care of yourself, your family, and when that emergency happens, whether it's during this event or daily, you have that background and some knowledge with it. And sort of lead on to what Johnny had said, keep a first aid kit in your car and home also, so you have access to those.
Thank you, Kevin. Chief Miller?
I don't really have a lot to add to that. Here, we set up this facility as a warming station and a place that you all can come to if these disasters happen. We have a 125 kW generator that runs this place. It's as good as what the 600 gallons of diesel fuel that there is in it. Now, if we can get our hands on diesel fuel, we can keep that going. But this place will be open to everybody that needs that to come to, and also to help with these gentlemen to take care of everything they need. That's what we have to provide.
Thank you. And this is Marcia Yonker, who runs the 911 system.
So for me, make sure, again, if an event's coming, you know it's coming, make sure cell phones or anything of that sort are charged. So if you lose electricity, you hopefully still have communications. Most of the cell sites in the area do have resilience to last for several days off of generator. So at least, unless that site itself was taken down, you have the ability to communicate and call out to get help. The normal public service announcements for me, problems we have, why I actually have an audience. If you accidentally dial 911, if you drop your phone, stay on the line. If not, it creates a major drain on resources. Currently, we have the ability to do text to 911, video to 911. That technology is already here. We can already do that. In that 911 hang-up situation, we initially try with a text in case it is a domestic type situation or something like that. It takes about 3 minutes to go through the entire policy, multiple calls. If you don't answer your phone, stay on the line. Let us know you are who our data says you are. Can validate the number you're calling from is the number we're seeing and your location. Then Johnny's staff has to come see you. That can be a problem whenever all you did was drop your phone or a kid was playing with the phone, because while they're at your house, they could be needed somewhere for an emergency when you don't have one. So just stay on the line, take the few minutes. That's all they're gonna do. If you can't validate your own cell phone number, at that point, we think something's wrong. Maybe somebody else has your phone. Maybe they're holding you against your will, whatever. So that's why that has to happen. As far as communications, we're there to do as much as we can, as long as the infrastructure's there. There's resiliencies on our side. We're on the state system. The county also still maintains their legacy system, which actually is going through an upgrade right now, in case that system goes down. And we work with John and his folks, or are continuing to work with John and his folks, to be able to actually have a communications network with them. So in that event that all the radios you guys have, you reach out to their network, they actually have a way to talk to us, because we currently don't have that if phones are down, because they'd have to call us. And well, you guys can't call us, they probably can't either. So we're working to make this network grow.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Marshall. Okay, now the question to you all is, so if nothing else works, then what are you going to do? You can start with you.
For us, we have built resiliencies in. Normally, obviously with 911, most communications by radio. We have, as I said, we have 2 ways to do that. We've added in internet capabilities. Unfortunately, the county can only take care of certain parts of that. We're working, and Jason has mentioned as well, to move towards Starlink, because even if power's out, as long as you have some type of backup power and the satellites are still in the sky, you'd still be able to communicate, or we would be able to communicate with each other. For us, that'll fix our end. Unfortunately, the opposite side, the receivers of that, would be responsible for their own Starlink part. So the county's came a long way in the last 4 years, still has some ways to go, but.
That's a really interesting point that we didn't talk about, is Starlink and the satellite communications. And there's a point downstream, if we all got sophisticated enough, that we might have a couple of nodes, 3 or 4 nodes throughout the county, which were Starlight nodes, so you knew that you could have communications, and then people could, maybe we can make that where the meeting sites are throughout the county. Mark, please.
What are you doing up there for? Keep going up there.
Keep calling them in, right? That's what we do. We kind of rely on Marshall to inform us or let us know when we need to go out. If it comes to the case where everything's down and we don't get that information, we're going to go out on our own and take care of what we need to take care of.
Kevin?
As far as EMS here within the county, we have 2 staffed units here in Berkeley Springs and 1 in Paw Paw. So there's many times we have all 3 of those plus units out. So that's where it comes back in the response side for you all, is knowing, that basic first aid, CPR, how to take care of yourself. Because in this major event, we only have so many resources that we're not going to be able to get there right away to help you. So you have to be able to help yourself. But as you're helping yourself, always remember your own safety. If you get hurt, you're no good to the next person. So remember your own safety. Make sure you have your safety glasses, like in your go bag, your leather gloves, or latex gloves, those kind of things, to be able to take care of and put your training to work. If you learn CPR and stop the bleed, that you can actually make a difference for yourself and your family. And again, like what Johnny said, make sure if in your go bag you have some non-perishable type food, peanuts, granola bars, so that if you are out on your own, you can survive, and plenty of water with that. And always remember, revert back to your basic skills that you have and that you've learned over the years. Just keep it simple.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Reverse order.
Okay, if nothing else works and you happen to get the message to stay in shelter in place or whatever, please shelter in place. The last thing we need to do is be out looking for people that went out on their own, couldn't get back, then we got to find them as well as handle everything else that's going on. And if you don't get that message and you don't need to leave, stay where you're at unless there's some emergency where you have to get out of your residence. But it's better to shelter in place and stand by. Like Kevin said, if you know how to do your own first aid and everything, you won't need us for that. If you can't call us, we don't know to come. So, plus we might not even know anything because communication in this county is incredible. As far as our radios go, or in this whole state, I was in DC for numerous years, and I lose more communication down there than I do here, which is crazy. I mean, down there, if you go in the metro or some of the buildings because of the granite and stuff, you don't have any communication at all. So here, it's amazing with the mountains and everything, how good it does work. But yeah, other than that, when everything shuts down, it's something I've never lived. So it's hard to say how for me to talk about it. I mean, closest I ever came was 9/11 when you couldn't use your cell phone because it was so busy. But other than that, I mean, country boy will survive, I guess.
Okay. I could probably talk for a half an hour, but I'm not going to. So whenever nothing else works, we fall back to some of the stuff that, has been mentioned here numerous times. Check in with people, let them know you're okay, your neighbors. We've got a lot of radios going out here today. So, you have friends and loved ones, we need to get messages to them somehow. In North Carolina and Tennessee, what's going on in the hurricane, there's a lot of resources being spent looking for people that may have left the area. So, if we can kind of get ahead of that and we know that people may or may not be there, whether we have somebody's lost or somebody just left on their own to go someplace else. The maps that we were going to make up didn't make it here today. But on the county website, we're still building our portion of the county website out. We've got some locations marked for community, I guess, like rally points. So you think of the fire station here, Greenwood Community Center, Pleasant View, Great Capen Fire Department, Paw Paw Fire Department. We have our schools that we use for shelters. So whenever we have events like this, if nothing else fails, what we're going to try to do is get people in those areas. So if you need something, you can go to that location or communicate with that location, and then that lets us know that you need help. That's the only way that we know. Somebody has to tell us. It's hard for us to go out and look for everybody. So that communication and kind of that circle and us building that together as a community and building that network. So if you would need something, you would either go or communicate with that center. They would forward it up to whoever would be in the Emergency Operations Center, and then we would get that back down to you. That's in the perfect world. That's how it would work whenever nothing else is working. So
If one other thing, if you do leave a note. What time you left and where you went.
yes.
Oh, that's nice. Did you hear that? If you leave a note and say where you left, when you left, and where you're going. Well, thank you. And Jason mentioned I have a wonderful map that we have printed up specifically for our county. It gives all of these rally points and all kinds of frequencies and things to do and prepare. And it's in UPS somewhere, and it was supposed to be here yesterday, and it didn't show up. And so the next time we all get together, and we'll talk a little bit about that, then we'll have something to look forward to. We'll get you all these maps. So thank you all, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And we're going to take a 5-minute break. It's 5 minutes, really, so for us to reset up here and get going. And then Lori Marino is going to come and talk about supplies. Thanks, Marshall.
All right, my name is Lori Marino. I think a lot of you know my name from all the emails you've been getting. And so welcome you here, thank you. I'd like to thank the South Morgan Firehouse for offering us this menu. It's a great place. And I appreciate all the, after bingo last night, the members of this firehouse broke down all the tables and set up all these chairs for all of us. So we thank them for that. So my husband and I are members of the firehouse, and we live here in South Morgan County. We moved here 2 years ago. We've been preparing for about 15 years, but we jump-started our preparedness in the Summer of Love, 2020. And so a lot of things changed in 2020. And so we learned a lot. I also work for a company that specializes in preparedness, American Contingency. It's a nationwide network of people that work together to become better prepared, and we'll talk a little more about that later, just to give you an idea what my background is. I also have a marketing consulting business and here in town, and so I worked for big companies for probably 2.5 decades doing marketing and communications. Okay, so we are going to go over 12 categories of preparedness. Some of this has been covered already, so where it's been covered, I'll just kind of move through it quickly. But our goal is to achieve a baseline level of preparedness. This is a very resilient community, so a lot of people here, I'm sure, are already prepared. And it's a farming community. A lot of people probably do a lot of this stuff, but for those of you who are just getting started, hopefully this will be helpful for you. It requires a commitment, time, and money, but it can be done on a budget. Okay, so water is the first thing we're going to talk about. Collecting and storing water. It's needed for hydration, for cooking, and for cleaning and sanitation. It's heavy, so when you're storing water and using it in a disaster, it's 8 pounds per gallon. And when you start lugging, 5-gallon buckets around because you need to flush the toilets, it's a lot of work. The recommendation for water is 3 gallons per day per person, and that does not include flushing toilets. So the recommendation is to store as much water as possible. 30 days of water for a family of 4 requires 360 gallons. You will always need more than you think. So if you have a pool or a spa or something like that, that's great. That water can be used for everything with treatment. There's 55-gallon drums, there's 5-gallon jugs, and there's these water bricks that I'm showing here. So for every product that I talk about, we have links on the website, preparemorgancounty.com, and you click on resources. So these water bricks are nice because they're 3.5 gallons and they're easy to lug around, especially for older people, and they stack up and store nice and tight in your basement or wherever you have to put them. Another thing we recommend is to either walk around your immediate area around your house or go on Google Maps and identify sources of water, ponds, streams, brooks, things like that. Because push comes to shove, you may have to at some point go and get water from those places. Filtration and purification. So what is it we're trying to remove from the water? Pathogens, heavy metals, chemicals, and then if you're pulling it out of surface water like a pond, you want to take out the soil. Boiling alone does not remove chemicals, which is why we recommend a gravity filter, like the ones you see here. You can use stored tap water, like the previous slide we're showing. If you store tap water in your basement or wherever, you can use that. You only have to purify it by boiling or adding some bleach. Or you can put it through a gravity filter. So having the stored water is great because you don't have to do a lot to it. If you use surface water, if you have to go and take buckets and pull it out of a pond, then you need to use a pre-filter to get out the mud and silt, and that would be cheesecloth or an old t-shirt or what have you. Pre-filter it and then put it through a gravity filter like this. And then you have to boil it or add bleach. So there are countertop filters that work very well, some. This slide is showing you the zero water filter at the top removes nearly 100% of all contaminants in water. And so there's the countertop pitcher at the top there, the blue one, and then there's the larger one on the right. And that removes nearly 100% of everything. And that is the only one that was tested here that did. Some of these water filters, at least most of them, they added aluminum to the water after it was filtered because there's aluminum in the filters. So the recommendation here is to go with zero water filter for your countertop, or one of these gravity filled filters here. They both do the same thing. For food, the question is how many people and how long. You have to consider nutrition, storage, and preparation. You need to plan on 2,500 calories as a rough estimate and 50 grams of protein per person per day. You would adjust this up or down based on your household. So males require more calories than females, active teenagers require more, and then pregnant and nursing women require more calories. So the best way to start storing extra food is just buy more of what you already buy, non-perishables, and then just stock it in your pantry or in your basement or under your bed or wherever you can put it. It's a less expensive way to get started. You can go to the store and you can just pick up, an extra can of baked beans or 2 extra cans of baked, whatever you can do. The point is to just start stocking it up. Then supplement with vitamins or grow your own sprouts because a lot of this canned food and non-perishable food is not the most nutritious. And then also less expensive sources of protein like peanut butter, canned tuna, beans, lentils, whey protein, powdered milk, that sort of thing. And then of course it's always good to grow your own food and then can or jar if you can. So for long-term emergency food storage, there are some options. There's a quick and easy, ready-to-eat freeze-dried meals, like I have noted on the slide here. This Peak Refuel is really good. You just add hot water to it and you let it sit for 10 minutes and then you have a meal. So if you do camping or anything like that, it's great for that. You can use it both for your longer-term storage and also for camping. And it's great to keep in your vehicle. I have some in my car so that if I ever get stuck on 81 or something like that in an ice storm or snowstorm, I have water, I have a way to heat it, and I have food in my car and I can actually eat. It's relatively expensive though because all the work is done for you. So those are about $9 a bag for 2 servings. Then there's pre-made emergency food buckets that have a shelf life much longer, 25 years, and that allow you to stock up, get your food storage up really quickly because you can buy these pre-made buckets. It is on the expensive side, especially if you want to get good quality food. This is a big business now, and there's a lot of these buckets for sale by different companies, and they have a lot of junk in it. You have to really read the ingredients. You can build your own buckets, which is what I've done. I bought one of these pre-made buckets. I looked at it and I said, well, I can do that. So you can just get a vacuum sealer from Costco or wherever and just store your own food and vacuum seal it, put it in bags, and then stuff your own buckets. And it's just a fraction of the cost of buying the pre-made ones. Sanitation is the most overlooked important topic. I have some pictures here from Western North Carolina. The devastation really caused, I'm sorry, I was helping with the recovery efforts there. It was tough. So people had nowhere to go to the bathroom. And the floodwaters hit some toxic chemical plants and everything else and just demolished everything, and all those toxins got in the mud and the dirt. And first responders have to wear complete PPE in order to protect themselves. A lot of them were getting sick and burned. Sewer backup or long-term outage is something that could happen to your house. So we're going down in severity here, from septic systems being overwhelmed down to just your sewer backing up. You need to have an alternative place to go and a way to dispose of the waste. So I have a picture here of it's called a luggable loo, and it's a bucket that you can use. You can put bags in there, and then you can dispose of the waste. And There's a whole nother topic of how to go about doing that, but we don't have the time to go into that here. For a short-term power outage, just have a way to flush your toilets. Have some 5-gallon buckets that come in super handy, and you'll be able to flush your toilets that way. The recommendation is stock up on bleach, paper towels, gloves, wet wipes, soap, trash bags, masks, and eye protection. So power, heat, and cooking. Think about how you would handle lighting. We have flashlights, headlamps. We got a beautiful flashlight from Hunter's Hardware in your bag. We want to thank Hunter's Hardware for providing that. That's really handy to have. Battery-operated lanterns, solar lights. I left candles off because we're in a firehouse, and candles are very dangerous. If you leave it unattended and a child or an animal knocks it over, it could cause a real problem. So we don't really recommend candles unless you don't have to worry about those things. For heat, like right now it's getting cold in Western North Carolina and people are living in tents. And this is what they're so if you have a wood stove or a fireplace or a pellet stove, that's wonderful, that's great. You can just go cut more wood or whatever. What they're using in Western North Carolina, and they're using thousands of these buddy heaters. So these are propane heaters that can be used inside your home. And there's a 1-pound propane tank on each side of that heater there. And that will heat you just decide one warm room in your house that you decide to keep warm because it's a lot easier, because this little thing is not going to heat the whole house. But things like this are really helpful to have. And of course, a carbon monoxide detector. For cooking, if you have a gas stovetop, that's wonderful. Outdoor gas grill, camp stove, solar oven, those should all be used outside. Stock up on propane. Propane stores really well, and keep it away from your dwelling if you can, because as Jason will tell you, it's also a risk. Generators. It's best to have redundancy. What will you do if there's no fuel to heat your house? It's best to have multiple fuels. So these dual fuel generators have both gasoline and propane capability, which is nice because if you run out of gasoline, you might have some propane tanks and you can use those instead. With generators, if we're in a situation where there's people in town that don't belong here, there's looting and whatnot, the sound of the generator and lights at night could cause a problem. So that's just something to think about. Solar generators are also a good option. I have both. We have, my husband and I have a portable generator and a solar generator. What's nice about the solar generators is they're quiet. And they get energy from the sun and they store it in batteries. And then the batteries, get refueled by the sun, which is nice. You can use these to power your refrigerator, your freezer, your lights, and your modem, and your devices. You keep it plugged into an AC outlet when you're not using it because it gets a charge from the wall. And then you should keep your solar panels out of sight. If you're using them in the daytime to get sun, you don't want them to be seen from the road. And then, of course, a whole house generator is wonderful, but they are very pricey. Medical. There's been some talk about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but as was mentioned, we need to be our own first responders. You have an increased risk of injury during disasters. So a medically prepared person in each household would be ideal. Someone that can go and learn first aid, stop the bleed, take the stop the bleed course, and be able to handle whatever comes up with your family if should that happen. I wanted to mention potassium iodide to protect the thyroid, because if something were to pop off in Washington, D.C., we might get fallout this way. So potassium iodide tablets are really important to have. And then, of course, you need the skills and training to go along with this. So basic first aid, CPR, stop the bleed. I've taken a tactical combat casualty care course, which is an advanced first aid that the military uses, which is really helpful as well. Health and wellness. So living through a disaster is very hard on the body and the mind. But functional fitness and sleep are something that we need to consider. You got to keep your body moving however you can right now. Clean the house, walk, garden, wash the car, exercise, lift weights, whatever it is you do, you want to be in as good shape as possible. Get at least 7 hours of sleep at night because it's critical for the body to restore itself. 8 or 9 hours is even better. You are what you eat. If you avoid packaged goods, seed oils, and preservatives, you'd be doing your body a whole lot better, and you might, be healthier. Eat whole, real foods and drink plenty of water. And then with natural medicine, there's a lot of things you can do to try to stay healthy. Echinacea is a great herb to build up your immunity. And when you feel something coming on, you start drinking some of that tea, and it could ward off a lot of things. And then, in my belief, I'm not a medical professional, but my belief is that vitamin D is like one of the single most things you can do to supplement, because nearly every adult is deficient in that, and that does wonders in keeping you healthy along with these other things. You might want to stock up on supplements, because during disasters, if the food isn't going to give you the vitamins and minerals you need, it's good to have some supplements. Vitamin D, C, magnesium, and then are just like a general multivitamin. Transportation. We talked about a get-home bag for your vehicle, but essentially it's think about if you were stuck on the road and your car stopped for whatever reason, and who knows, there could be any scenario, but what would you need to get home? So if I'm out in the summer and I'm wearing flip-flops, I want to make sure that I have a nice pair of hiking boots or sneakers in the back of my car so that I can put those on and get home safely. Footwear, socks, extra clothing, water, food, a power bank, sunscreen, hat, all these things are helpful. Gasoline. Keep your gas tank at least half full at all times. Storing gasoline is a little tricky, and it's not all that safe, but you have to use the proper containers and use full fuel stabilizers and rotate your stock if you store it. And then it's good to know which stations have backup power, because the gas stations won't be pumping if the power is out. Diesel is safer to store. Stock up on the diesel exhaust fluid. And then some tools that can be very helpful are battery chargers, shovels in the back of your car. If you have a truck, a chainsaw, tire repair kit, emergency lights, all those sort of things. Income and economics. So it's really good to not be in debt when things get tough. My husband is an accountant, and he made it so that we paid off our mortgage in 17 years, our first mortgage. So it's nice to not have those big nuts or the big credit card bills and things like that. But when you're planning for a disaster, it's good to have some cash in the house, because if the power goes out, the credit cards are not working. So have cash and have some small bills. You don't necessarily need a lot, but if you think about how much you spend at the grocery store for your family, try and put away, a week or two or a month or whatever you can worth of cash in the house, so that if there is no credit cards, you'd be able to go to the store and pay cash. Bartering is another option when you're in a long-term scenario. What do you have on hand or in your house that you could trade for what you need? You could trade supplies, you could trade your skills, labor, food, etc. Gold and silver is widely recognized as valuable, and that can be used when the cash runs out, or if cash is no longer desired, like in a situation where you have a financial collapse or hyperinflation. It is nice to have a little bit of this set aside. Even though the price have gone up in gold and silver, it is still really suppressed. So having some silver coins would be a good idea. And then also, how would you generate income if you were to lose your job? You might want to start like some sort of side business. Outdoor skills. The main thing with this is just to avoid hypothermia. If you have to evacuate and you find yourself in your car or outside, knowing how to start a fire and to build a simple shelter. I'm going to make these slides available on the website under the resources section, so I won't go through every one of these bullets, but you'll have it. Security and defense. Chief Johnny talked about this, but situational awareness, always pay attention to your surroundings when you're out. I try to make it a good idea not to be on my phone at all when I'm out about, especially going in and out of your car and in parking lots and in and out of stores and things like that. Always be aware of what's going on around you. Home security, I'm thinking we could do another workshop on this, what to do to make your home more secure. But things you can do like signage, no trespassing signs, have a dog, motion sensor, lights, cameras, remove the landscaping around your doors and windows so that you could see if anybody's trying to hide there. Enhance your door security is a really good one. Get some upgraded locks and really long screws. And identify a safe room inside your house and make sure it has a solid door, not one of those ones that you can just punch a hole through, and put some good screws in there, and that would make that room harder to get into. And fire safety, practice evacuating your household. Firearms. If you're a firearm owner, it's highly recommended that you get the training and practice regularly. It's a perishable skill. Be ready to defend yourself and your family as a last resort within the legal limits of the law. And also store it safely. Store all your guns safely when not in use, away from children and unauthorized users. It's always good to have less than lethal options. Pepper spray, or learn how to defend yourself physically, things like that. I'm thinking we could probably do another workshop on that. Now, community is the reason why we're all here, and it's the most important aspect of preparedness. It's not an individual sport. There's power in numbers. Morgan County knows how to be a community. That's one of the things I love about being here. We can leverage the unique skills of each one of you and make the community more resilient. We don't have to be experts at everything. We're looking to be self-reliant and interdependent upon one another, and so that we can thrive together. And so most of what we talked about is local, but there is a beyond local aspect where if we were in a situation where the supply chains were to break down, like John mentioned, we would need connections outside of a local area to be able to get help or to get supplies. And that's when a national network comes in handy. So I am the national marketing manager for American Contingency, and I also run a local chapter here in the Eastern Panhandle. American Contingency is a network of people that work together to become more prepared and build the skills, resources, and confidence to persevere through difficult times. We have 4,300 members across all 50 states. We have 156 local chapters, one of which is right here in Morgan County, serving the Eastern Panhandle. And we have 2,000 ham radio operators. Once you become a member, it's a subscription, and it's like $5 a month. You can get daily situational awareness updates, online training courses in the 12 categories we just covered today. And we also have a fully staffed operations center for member support and disaster response. American Contingency packed up 750 disaster kits and sent them into Western North Carolina during that disaster. And so that's just one example, but there are other examples of when people in North Carolina needed help. We sent ham radio operators to help out with that as well. There are knowledge sharing groups on the website where, like, say you wanted to learn, some skill, like, picking locks comes to mind. There's a lock picking group. And of course I have to say, don't do anything illegal with the lock picking, but you have access to a network of people all working towards the same goal, and it's little as $5 a month. We have a table set up over here, and we have some AMCON members over here as well that you can ask questions to. wrong way. Okay, so communication is the last topic, and Josh Walton is going to be taking us through that portion of it. But basically, you need to be able to communicate when communication is down. And John talked a little bit about this. GMRS, which is what we are setting you all up with these radios and with the repeater on top of Kakapo Mountain. It was the single most important band in Western North Carolina for people to stay in touch with each other. So that's what we're going to have for our community. Thanks to MCECN for that. There was one town in Little Germany that was completely cut off and only able to communicate to the outside world with one resident's little radio, like you probably have in your bag right now. That was their only lifeline to the outside world. So even if you don't get a GMRS license or a ham license, you can always get a radio and just listen, because there's a lot of good information that will be on the airwaves. Another last recommendation is to have an emergency radio that operates on batteries or by crank winding, or solar to get updates on what's happening around you. And then, are we taking a break? Yes. How many minutes? Okay, we're going to be taking a 5-minute break, and then Josh Walton is going to come and talk to you in detail about communications. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, everybody. My name is Josh Walton, and I'm wrapping up here with the last little piece, as we're going to talk about communications and the radios. So I'm the VP with the Morgan County Emergency Communications Network. Please find out some more information from us over at our table. It's the one over here with the black matching drape. And if you would like to learn more about radios that you didn't learn after I speak, we are a good place to find that out. So one of the things that we've learned is that communication after a disaster is incredibly important. Communication in general is incredibly important. It's so important that you put a $1,000 device in your pocket that you carry everywhere, and when you leave it in the kitchen and go to work, you get really nervous because it's still sitting in the kitchen. It's important. It gets wiped out sometimes, that communication over your cell phone. Or even your internet goes down for a while, especially if you have certain companies that are in this area that provide your internet can go down for weeks at a time. Thank God for alternate providers that we have. It's important because you want to be able to reach loved ones, just wish them happy birthday, or to know that you just survived a storm or a flood and that you're okay. It's important because you want to understand what's happening around you. You can listen to the radio station, the broadcast radio station, and you'll get some local news. That's great. You gotta have a device to do that. But you also might want to be able to reach out to your neighbors or reach at the bottom of the mountain if you live at the top of the mountain to find out how on earth are you going to go get groceries that week because something bad happened. Most importantly, we're learning, especially after Helene, that coordinating after a major disaster, those radios come in really, really handy when nothing else is working. And that's what we're here to talk about, is when nothing else works. The last thing is, sometimes it's just nice to know you're not alone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about radio at a high level. I could literally stand up here for hours and talk about radio, but you guys don't want to sit in those hard metal seats for hours, so I'm going to keep it short, and this is going to be an overview. And I will talk about how to actually use the radios that are being provided over here on this table. So in Helene, we learned a lot of things. I was looking at a lot of after-action reports from groups that were responding down there, and they always went through different things that they thought was helpful. I learned two interesting things about what things were helpful to have on stock and to use. Of course, there was things like food, water, a way to heat something. But the two other things I learned was blankets. I can't tell you how many times I heard blankets. And the other one, which I knew was going to happen, is they said communications and radios. There were communities that were completely cut off and are still cut off, and their only means of reasonable communication is still through ham radios. It's also how they were coordinating the response. When nothing else was working, that was their only way of doing it. It became a very key component of how people survived and how they recovered. There's stories of groups of amateur radio operators that were operating nets for 12 and sometimes not quite 24 hours a day, but they were operating them every day, and they are still operating them every day. I'll cover what a net is later in this presentation. I was actually incredibly surprised at how important ham radio communication became in that response. Oh, I like this one. Forget cell phones. Amateur radio shines in the wake of Helene. It's just over and over again. I did a Google search. It was literally like hundreds of pages of this stuff. All right, the first thing I'm going to tell you is get a license, and there's many different reasons for this. There's an organization run out of Washington, D.C. called the FCC, and they don't like it when you use our public spectrum and you are not properly licensed. I'm going to go through a little bit about the 3 different licenses that are applicable today. There are literally hundreds of different types of licenses, but these are the 3 that we're worried about today. The first one is the multi-use radio service. That's your walkie-talkies that you can buy from Walmart. They stick them into a package. You can do nothing with that except for use the channels that are on there, and that's it. That's actually not requiring any type of paperwork for a license for MERS. You get the license implied when you purchase it. The second one, that is like a toy walkie-talkie that you buy from, if you remember, Radio Shack or some other store like that. That's what those were. The next one is GMRS. That is General Mobile Radio Service. You purchase it. It's about $35, and it is good for anyone in your household, however you describe your household. It has the advantage that you can do some modifications to the radio within reason, and it also has use of repeater systems. I'm going to talk about repeater systems. You must purchase that in order to use the GMRS radios, according to the FCC. Then you have the amateur radio service, which kind of gets much broader, but it's broken down into 3 licensing levels. One's called technician, one's called general, one's called extra. Each one requires a test. Each one gives you extra privileges or capabilities beyond that. The lowest level is technician, and it gives you very similar capabilities that we were talking about with GMRS, but you get to play and modify things and do other fun stuff that geeks like me love to do. We asked folks to get a GMRS license before getting one of these radios that are over here, because that is the closest thing that will cover you with the FCC and using those radios. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. But I want everyone to be aware that there are these different classes of licenses that helps everybody stay within the law, like everyone is telling you, stay within the law with the FCC. Wrong way. Oops. Oh, I actually had 2 slides for this. It's because I made a mistake. There's some resources out there if you are interested in studying for an amateur radio license. Hamstudy.org is my favorite. And then there's great YouTubes out there. This guy, his name is Josh too, interestingly, but he runs this thing called Ham Radio Crash Course. He's on YouTube, or you go to hamradiocrashcourse.com. He has an unbelievable amount of incredibly well done training and information there. So if you're interested in doing something with an amateur radio license, that's where you would go. Now, why am I so interested in talking about getting licensed? Because I can give you this radio without a license, and you're only going to be able to use it in an emergency. But you're not going to know how to use it because you've never practiced with it. So I'm encouraging everyone to get licensed so you can practice using radios legally when there's no emergency. And when there is an emergency, you'll know what you're doing. I'm going to say that over and over again. Could talk a little bit now about radio capabilities and understanding this, because there's a lot of misconceptions, and I know there's a lot of people in this room who really don't actually know much about radio besides the fact that I can tune to 91.1 and listen to some music in the car when I'm driving around. Radio is a huge area of our world in terms of spectrum. It's enormous. And they divide that spectrum up into little areas. The only reason I have this chart up here is just to show you that we take the spectrum and we call them different names depending upon what they do. And your licenses give you different access to different spectrums. And we are only working in one little area over here to right here. When you get into the amateur radio stuff, you start getting access to these other spectrums. Okay, that's one point. The second point is the spectrums determine what your radio signals can do. The spectrum that we are talking about, way over here, with the little radios that are on the table over there, the little handheld 5-watt VHF, UHF, they have about a 10-mile line of sight capability. That means if I'm sitting in Omaha, Nebraska, with flat land and you're 10 miles away, think of it a dark night, you see a 100-watt light bulb out there, you can see it 10 miles away. That radio is only 5 watts, but it'll work roughly 10 miles. Do we live in flatlands? No, we have a problem. They're called mountains. Mountains and trees are not friendly to UHF and VHF signals. So there's this whole other area that we call HF, which is how you work when you get into a general or an extra amateur license, and that gives you that capability that gets you around the world. So my whole point in telling you that is these radios go 10 miles. We can use a repeater to get you about 50 miles. You're not going to be that guy that sits with a radio in your basement and talking around the world without getting yourself either a general or an extra amateur radio license and some better equipment. So that's kind of the myth I wanted to dispel. Is you're not going to pick up this radio and talk to somebody in Europe. You're not going to talk to somebody in Pennsylvania, most likely, maybe the edge of it. You're going to be able to talk to somebody in the room within a 10-mile radius. If you can see each other, if you use a repeater, you're going to get out of the county barely. You'll cover the county. That's the range that we're talking about with these things. So without a light, with all by themselves, with 2 radios, 10 miles, if you're lucky, with a repeater, you're going to get the county, maybe outside the county. You can talk on these radios. You can use voice. Oh, there's a question.
Yes, sir. I was asking earlier, handheld 5-watt, if the wife and I want to get a higher wattage radio, would that then increase that distance? Or would the mountains and trees still impact if that radio that they gave us is 5 watt and I got a 20 watt?
The question is, if I amp up the power of the radio, can I get further? That's the question.
Yes, sir.
The answer is technically yes, but the mountains are still going to absorb your power even if you're throwing thousands of watts. It's like light. A small light you can see easily in the distance. You throw a mountain in the way, and now you're going to need something like a Hollywood spotlight to get over that mountain so you can be seen.
Okay, the last part of the question is, if our radios have a 8-inch antenna and I put a 12-inch antenna, would that increase the distance?
The question was, can I put a better antenna on this radio to make it work better? The answer to that is yes. Is it going to get you over the mountain? Probably not.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Increasing power makes it work better. Increasing the efficiency of the antenna or getting your antenna higher makes it work better. But they still may not overcome things like mountains.
All right.
UHF, VHF, I'm just mentioning this. You can do voice, which means you're talking. You can do data. If you're really good and really, like me, a nerd, you can figure that out. I'm not going to show you how to do that tonight because we don't have time. You can even send emails over those things. But, like I said, we don't have time. The most important thing about amateur radio is you don't have expensive infrastructure to run it. Your cell phone, you're talking about, what, $1,000 roughly, depending on your flavor? And just imagine how much a single cell phone tower costs. It's in the millions. These little guys are $20. By themselves, like I said, you're going to get 10 miles. So that's $40 to talk 10 miles away. Throw a repeater up on the mountain. Now, those are a few $1,000s, and the towers are tens of thousands, but still much less expensive than your cell phone towers, and they're there for people to use. Okay, we're talking a little bit about the UHF, VHF capabilities, and I'm concentrating on this because that's the type of radio that is sitting on the table over there. It's a UHF, VHF handheld radio. It's 5 watts. Just like a light bulb, it's a 5-watt light bulb. Line of sight, I said, I put 15 miles here. It's like 10 to 15 miles. With repeaters, you're going to get 50. Some of the repeaters that are around here, I've gotten all the way into Reston, all the way almost to DC with them. It gets really choppy at that point, but that gives you an idea of the range of what that does. And the way it works is this, is when our mountains, here's 2 radios over here. When the mountains are in the way, you can't hear each other. But you throw a big antenna on top of a mountain, you can see it on one side and it bounces down to the other side. That's all it does. It's very simple. It increases our range to much broader because more people can see the top of the mountain than they can see you sitting in the valley. So a good rule of thumb with these radios is if you have a group of people that you're interested in staying in communication with, say your neighborhood, you can coordinate a single channel that the neighborhood will use in order to talk to each other. Because like I said, you have a nice 10-mile radius. If your neighborhood is built in some place like West Virginia where it rolls every quarter acre into another area, you might have a little trouble. You might need to go to the top of your house, top floor, and look out the window in order to talk to just even your neighbor who's only a couple hundred meters away. So that's why you want to get a license, because you need to practice. And you need to figure out what's going to work to keep in touch with your neighbors. If you're trying to coordinate talking with somebody that's across the county or much further away, and you know that that 10-mile radius is not going to work for you, you need to coordinate yourself on a repeater channel. And then you have to make sure that you know where those repeaters are, because not all the repeater channels in GMRS have a repeater on them. In fact, there are only 2 right now, and I'm only telling you about one of them because one of them is privately owned, and I don't have permission to tell you where that other one is. You can look that person up online, and you could ask them for permission. Lori, I stepped out for a minute. Did you talk about PACE in yours? Okay, all right. I'm going to introduce a concept to you that's new. It's called PACE. And you'll see this everywhere online, but it's part of what you need to do if you plan on using a radio or any other type of communication system with a group of people that you want to keep in contact with, like your family. It is primary, auxiliary, contingent, and emergency. It's just PACE. It's kind of easy to remember the word PACE, because if they just said it's your first plan, second plan, third plan, fourth plan, or plan 1, plan 2, plan 3, plan 4, and you called it your 1, 2, 3, 4, it would be kind of hard to remember because it doesn't stand out. So they call it PACE. The idea behind this is that you have an agreed upon plan on how to contact or get a hold of somebody in your life, and you agree upon this plan early. So you might have a plan for your children at school. And you might say, if something happens weird, like a tornado touches down, let's try to get into contact with the primary, which is cell phone or text. If that's not working for some reason, we should use the house phone. If that's not working, and mommy and daddy aren't home, the children should probably go to Tim's house. Maybe Uncle Tim is down the road. And then if you are not home and you can't get home, maybe you should ask for a ride home. I don't know if this is going to work for your family. It doesn't work for my family because I don't have a Tim at the end of my lane. You might have a family plan that's slightly different. Cell phone. That's how I'm going to talk to my family if I can't get a hold of them. But if the cell phones are down, what's the next easiest option for us? Well, actually, email might not be bad if we're kind of far away. So, this one I was actually saying my family in Pennsylvania, so they are far away. So if I can't tell you that I'm okay by telephone or text message, I'm going to email you. If that's not working, we're going to pick up these radios that I have a license for, and we're both going to talk on this fictional Sidwell repeater at 7 p.m. So something bad happens, just on the day of something bad happening at 7 p.m., we're going to turn those radios both on to the same repeater, we're going to talk. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to send you a postcard because it's bad. And we know that the USPS can always get it through. I won't go through the whole thing. You're getting the idea here. Is you have these different types of ways of communicating with someone, and do you notice something? I don't know if anybody picked up on this. None of them are related with each other. So I didn't say first we're going to try to call somebody and then we're going to try to text somebody, because we know if you can't call, you probably can't text. You might be able to, but probably not. And then the next one said, use a house phone, which is a completely different system, hopefully, than a cell phone, if you still have a landline in your house. And if that doesn't work, maybe we use email, because maybe that's working. It's a different system. Now, if you try to do all of these things, like your house phone is your cell phone, and you only check your email on your cell phone, and you only have internet on your cell phone through your cell provider, you're kind of screwed. You get the idea. Go to Tim's house. That's a physical location. Ask for a ride home. They're all different systems. So the whole point is each one of these is a different piece of infrastructure. It's a different method. If the infrastructure is destroyed or unavailable for some reason, you move on to the next one. So you come up with these plans. You put them on a little card, you stick them in your wallet, you stick them in your purse, your children's backpack, and you might talk with your children about it, say once every couple months, to remind them what they should do if they're at school and there's a problem, what they should do if they're home and mommy and daddy are not home and there's a problem. That's called a PACE plan. It's planning ahead and being responsible. Okay, let's talk a little bit about these emergency radios. I lost mine already. The common name for these is a handheld walkie-talkie or handy-talkie. Those are all common names. This particular one, the brand name is Baofeng, and it is the most common model that Baofeng makes, which is a UV5R. In the world of radio, these are considered disposable trash. They're $20. A typical radio that an amateur is going to buy that looks very similar with similar capabilities runs in the 200 to 300 range. You stick that on the side of a law enforcement officer and suddenly it becomes an $8,000 radio. There's reasons for that. They have to work all the time. It's okay. These radios are primarily for listening, because that's the most important part, is understanding the situational awareness. They are primarily for listening. I got to open it up in here. Let's just do this. Technical difficulties. Space. There we go. In the box, you're going to find a couple of things. The very first thing you're going to find is a warning, and I'm going to go through this warning with you in another slide. It's just telling you what you need to know about the proper and legal way to operate this radio. The second thing you're going to find in there is a frequency list that we put together. It includes channels that are specific to this county. The next thing you're going to find is a Chinglish manual. Good luck. You're going to find the radio. It's in a little bag. The battery. If you can't figure out how to put that battery on, return the radio. There's an antenna. It works. It ain't very good. You talked about it. Does a better antenna make it work better? Yes, it does. Go to Amazon and find a new antenna. They're really easy to find. Just look up Baofeng and antenna, and they'll show you a whole bunch that you can choose from. Nagoya is the better brand out there. Don't worry about remembering it, because it's printed on the piece of paper that's inside of here that we wrote up as a recommendation. Replace the antenna. Other than that, you're going to get a really wonderful earpiece that will blow your ear out if somebody talks too loud. It's terrible. There is a little clip that you can put on there so you can clip it to your belt. That's actually kind of handy. Then there's a charging cradle and a little rope if you want a rope off of your radio. All right, charge these guys roughly about once every 6 months. Don't leave them on the charger. It's like, that's how you ruin a battery, is you keep it charging all the time, and it's not good. So you stick it on there once every 6 months, you pull it off. These things will, if you turn them on and you're listening with them, they'll last roughly about 24 hours. If you are talking on it and you have the proper license and reason to talk on it, they're going to last about 12 hours. Keep that in mind and how you might want to keep it charged up. There's a great little accessory they sell, is they'll sell you a brand new battery that'll fit right on there, looks identical to the one that they shipped you, except for it has a USB-C plug on the bottom of it to charge it without having to use these not so great chargers. They're not that expensive. We are providing them free to everyone. We are not selling them to anybody. And they are programmed with a variety of channels in the GMRS and the amateur radio bands. Most of the channels are turned off, especially those that you should be listening to only, such as weather channels, such as emergency channels that the county uses, so you can listen to them. And I'm trying to think what else is on there. I'd have to review the list. The list will tell you which ones are that you can transmit on when you have the proper license, and which ones you should only be listening to. And we have turned off all the transmit capabilities on most of the stations that you should never be transmitting on. This is my warning, and I'm going to read it to you so I know that everybody heard this. You are responsible to operate this radio in compliance with FCC regulations. This radio should only be used to transmit in an emergency situation when life or property is at risk. All the licensing rules go out the window when life or property are at risk. It is always legal to listen to any channel as long as you're in the United States. You must have an appropriate license to transmit on any radio. This radio has transmit capabilities on the amateur radio, GMRS, and MERS radio services. The radio is legal to transmit on the amateur radio bands if you have an amateur radio license. This radio is not legal to transmit on the GMRS or MERS radio services, even with a license. Only in an emergency can you do that. They will sell you the identical piece of hardware programmed with GMRS at twice the cost, and it comes in the same box, and it is legal to transmit on that radio. If your life or someone else's life or your property or someone else's property is at risk, you can transmit on that radio. It is legal to transmit on any service, including amateur radio, GMRS, MERS, in an emergency when life or property is at risk. Okay. That was my make sure everyone understands what they are allowed to do on these things. And by the way, yes, you can go and you can buy everything on Amazon to build and replicate this exact radio. Oops, wrong way. Okay, we talked about what's in here and everything that's useful. Oh, I didn't make this other point, is radio's light. If you put a light inside of a room like this, can you see it outside unless you're shining it through the window? No. Oh, I have a question in the back.
Yeah, what's the country code for I'm signing this up for United States as a country code?
1.
Should be 1,
1?
but I don't know why you would need that.
For signing up for the FCC. Once you're on my cell phone number.
I didn't put anything in there.
Oh, I'm not familiar with how the FCC is looking at these, but the country code is probably referring to the country code of your cell phone. They're just trying to identify you. Okay, that's exactly what's happening. The FCC has some weird stuff the way they do it. I'm going to mention a few things about the FCC, but that country code is your cell phone or your primary telephone number that they're asking for, which is 1.
Thank you.
All right, let me go back to using this radio. That last point down there was it's light. You're trying to use it inside of a building. It may work, it may not. If you're trying to use it inside of a car, it's a Faraday cage, it may work, it may not. The best way to use this radio is to step outside. Okay, let's talk about the buttons on these radios. Things that you need to know. If you want to turn it on, oh, he gave me a laser pointer. Yeah, there is a big knob up here. It turns your radio on, and it turns the volume up and down. The big thing sticking out of the top, anyone want to gander what that's called? It's an antenna. There is a dual display on the front. All that means is that there are 2 lines. There's an A line, the top one, and a B line, the bottom one. All that means is it can listen to 2 different stations at the same time. It'll automatically flip when there's traffic or somebody talking on one of them. The thing you have to remember is that there's a little arrow that you can barely see here. It's on the bottom one. And if it's sitting on the bottom one, when you push the talk button, which I'll show you in a minute, you're going to talk on that channel. If it's on the top one, you're going to talk on that channel. Just keep that in mind. There is a blue button here, it says AB. It flips that little arrow from the bottom to the top and from the top to the bottom. There is a button here, right next to the display. It says FM and alarm. It will turn your radio into a regular broadcast FM radio, so you can listen to music. It'll wear your battery out quick, but you can do it. Great if that's your only radio and you want to find out what's happening locally. If you push and hold it, it hits the alarm and it makes this horrible noise that you got to turn the radio off in order to get it to stop doing it. The common name for the button that you push when you want to talk is a PTT, which means push to talk. Can anyone tell me how to use the PTT? Okay, yes, and have the appropriate license in order to push the talk. You do have to hold it in, yes, because once you stop pushing it, you can't talk anymore. And that's why they call it the push to talk. But that is a good question. There is a button, I didn't label it down, or they didn't label it down here. There is a flashlight on this thing. If you push the button under the PTT, it turns the flashlight on and off. The thing that confuses people the most is the big orange button on the front. It's got some letters on it. Technically, it says VFO MR. It means it's changing from the variable frequency oscillator into the memory register. All it means is it changes from a nice, cleanly, easy-to-read name to a whole bunch of numbers. That's all it does. So if you see a bunch of numbers on there, hit the orange button. It'll say words. The one thing that these things do kind of well, especially at their price point, is they can scan through all of the different frequencies. So if you're in an emergency and you're trying to figure out what's going on around you, you could take this thing and hit the scan button, and it'll go through all of the different frequencies and pick up when someone's talking. It ain't the best scanner, but it does work. To do that, you hit the star scan, which is the star button, which is just like a telephone, and it has in little blue, almost impossible to read letters, it says scan. So you push that button and hold, and it starts flipping through it. To turn it off, you do it again, or you just turn the whole thing off. It'll stop scanning. You might want to turn it back on if you want to listen to something else. The last thing is how do you change channels? It's hard to see them, but there is an up and a down button right at the very top, up and down. That moves, one of them will move your frequency. Well, we lost that. Oh, somebody pulled a wire? How could that happen over there? All right. Okay, we're back. The up and down button allow you to change channels. All right, congratulations. You just learned how to use a Baofeng radio. Kind of. Oh, channels in the guide is there's the GMRS, there's the amateur, there are the weather channels on there. So there's a couple different places that broadcast weather 24/7. All of them are in there, and only 2 or 3 of them work in this area depending upon which part of the county you're on. And then there's the government frequencies for if their newer radio systems fail, they will fall back to those analog systems, and you could possibly pick up some information there. There is a GMRS MCECN repeater for GMRS that is going to be installed hopefully by the end of the year. We are opening that one up to the public for those that have a GMRS license. It is located at the top of Kekapin Mountain, and it should cover most of the county. So for the GMRS license holders, they will be able to use that. And that happens to be one of the frequencies that folks around us in emergency communications for the county will be listening to. There is one amateur radio repeater on there as well that this group uses. So if you have an amateur radio license, you can broadcast on that one as well. Otherwise, you can listen to it and find out what's going on, because that's where most likely, if there's an emergency, we're going to be talking about it. An example of what do you do if you're not used to talking on the radio, but you are properly licensed or in a situation where your life or your property is at risk. At the bottom here, is an example of what you might want to say. You push which button? All right, push to talk. You hold the button, you give it a second, and then you say, emergency, emergency, emergency. This is Jane, please help. You say emergency so people clearly understand that there is a problem. You say it 3 times because with radio, you want to hear things multiple times and clearly in case you're not in the best point. Turn your car radio off and you start listening to it. Quickly pick up the radio that's on the side and you hear someone say emergency, emergency, emergency. You know something important is coming through. And then you say your name so the other person knows what to call you. You might come back and say, Jane, what is your emergency? And then you have a conversation. This is my second to last slide, and I wanted to talk a little bit about nets. I need a little audience participation here. Don't worry, it's really easy. I need everyone to tell me what your name is in 3 seconds, all right? That means using words and no devices, no writing, no sign language, no nothing. I just want to hear your name. 3, 2, 1. I couldn't figure out anyone's name in this room. Radios are the same way when there's lots of people on them. When you're all broadcasting, you can't understand a darn thing that's happening. So there's this little clever thing called a net. I'm not quite sure why they call it that, but it seems to work. Everybody calls it that. What it is it's a way for me to control the radio traffic or the conversation and get one person to talk at a time. So it's something like this. If I'm the net control operator, I might say, you, tell me your first name. Brian. There you go. You, tell me the first name. Joe. There we go. All the way around. And then everyone can hear the first names and everyone knows what's going on. I'm not going to get into the full details here. It's just this is what happens on repeater systems in an emergencies is they run this thing called a net. There's somebody who's in control and they're going to direct the traffic and they're going to ask for things. Periodically, they're going to say, are there any new check-ins? A check-in means, hey, I'm new, net control doesn't know that I'm there yet, and that's the time where I'm going to try to tell my name, my call sign, and try to get into the net control's brain so that he knows or she knows to call on you later on. I'm just telling you this because this became one of the most important things in some of the responses at Helene, is they were running these nets all day, every day, and they were saving lives and saving property and helping people just from running these nets. So there's a net control. They're in charge of directing who talks. There is a check-in period where you would say your name, and then they'll go through and call through each person's name and find out what are they going to tell me. The last terminology I'll throw out here is called traffic. All traffic means it's the message you're trying to say. So if I'm there because my house is on fire and it's an emergency, that's my traffic. My house is on fire. I live at this address. Could you please send somebody to help? That's my traffic. So the net control might say, what is your traffic? That's my traffic. It's a message I want to send. They do have 3 classifications for traffic. One is routine, one is priority, one's emergency. You'll hear that a lot. Routine just means, hey, it's a bright sunny day, I'm happy, nothing's happening. That's routine. Priority is, hey, we've got free ham and cheese subs down at the local firehouse. Everybody should come out and get it. It's food, it's important, it's a priority. It means it's more important than routine. And last is emergency. If you can't figure out what emergency is, then you shouldn't be in this room. Speak clearly, speak loudly, speak slowly, identify yourself. That's my trick for nets. All right, last slide. Everyone's been waiting for this. Where are people going to be hanging out in the county when there is an emergency? There are 2 places that the NCECN group will most likely be hanging out. One is the amateur repeater owned by KK3L, that's a person. We will most likely be on that repeater. It's number 63 or 64 on those radios. And you'll probably hear nets going on those radios. So it's labeled KK3L, and it happens to be 63 or 64 on these particular radios. Second place is a new GMRS repeater that I mentioned. The label in the radio is GM18-R. What that means is GM for GMRS. It's the number 18 slot which is how GMRS works. They have slots. It's number 18, and the /R means it has a repeater on there. That's all it means. It happens to be number 26 on these radios. Those are the two places on the radio systems that people will be listening in an emergency, and I see a hand up. Yes.
Are they pre-programmed in there?
They are pre-programmed in there. Yes.
Did you talk about how you have to punch in 3 numbers to get to 26? Like
Oh,
26?
yeah, that's a really good point. To get to 26 on a radio, on these radios, you have to put in 0 to 6. I should have put that on the slide. That's a good one. Thank you. And there was somebody back here. Yes.
Do these radios still transmit while we're charging?
Yes, they do transmit while they're charging. They don't do it well. These chargers that are on here, that are in the box, tend to cause interference. I just know that from experience. So it is best to get a second battery, to get an alternate way to power the radio. They sell those things on Amazon. They're not expensive to buy. My highest recommendation is that buy another one of these. Have 2 full radios, because you know one's going to get broken.
They don't come pre-programmed.
They come pre-programmed with gibberish. The question was, do they come pre-programmed? They come pre-programmed with gibberish. They do need to be programmed.
Well, MCECN could program for people, I would think.
And MCECN folks would be happy to coordinate getting a programming party. Alex.
I want to point out there's 2 versions of the both on radio. There's the ham version and there's the GMRS version. Now, some people think they buy the GMRS version, then they hack it to operate in the ham bands. Once you do that, that's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And last I knew, with the FCC fine, if they impose it, it's $10,000.
That's right. Yes. So there are 2 versions that they sell, and I mentioned that earlier, is they sell this version, which has nothing programmed in there, and it's generally for amateur radio operators. And they sell a GMRS version, which you could hack and program it with other things.
But if you hack it, this radio, you hack this radio to run in the ham bands, that's illegal.
If you hack,
This, both on radio.
if you transmit or try to sell the radio,
And it's capable of being hacked.
yes. Yeah, so the FCC doesn't like it when you use radio equipment outside of what was intended for. That's why we're saying if you broadcast on these radios, have the proper licensing. And if you go and purchase these things and then hack them and put them into a band that it was not designed for, make sure you have the proper license in that band, and you're better off just buying the one that is intended for that band. FCC is concerned about transmitting. So have the license for when you transmit. If your life or property is in danger, you can transmit on any radio if it is to save your life or property. Okay, the last thing is I talked a little bit about nets, and you have these 2 channels that people will be hanging out. Nets generally occur in an emergency at the top of the hour during daylight hours. That's only during major emergencies. During minor emergencies, nets generally happen only on evenings around 7 o'clock, 7:30 on those repeaters, and maybe just once a day for minor emergencies. When nothing's going on, and it's just everyone's outside gardening and having a great time, there is a net at 7:30 on the KK3L repeater. You can listen to those now and see how a net works. Those are all my slides. There's a bunch of people that are wearing these black shirts, or have they already taken them off? They're part of the emergency communications group, and you can ask them questions. I have one last question for this group. If you have an amateur radio license, could you raise your hand? These are also folks that can help you answer questions. Thank you, everybody. I'm making an announcement, but I'm not, okay, I'll make the announcement. One is we are a 501c3 nonprofit. That's the Morgan County Emergency Communications Network. There are some forms over here on the table. about joining, or if you're interested, or if you'd like to see more presentations of what those presentations might be. So please give us some feedback. And there's a whole back side of this feedback form, so you can give us lots of good feedback. So thank you for coming out. Please let us know how we can help, what you're interested in, and we appreciate it. Oh,
So, wait one moment before you all leave, please. I hope you found this helpful. And we've been approached by a number of people who have suggested that they really like this. And what we are considering is to keep this kind of series of meetings and trainings available throughout the year. What we've thought about is having major meetings like this on quarterly so that we could all get together around a certain subject. But in particular, for instance, the chief of the EMS, Kevin Duckwall, said, I will teach a course that'll take an hour or an hour and a half on first aid or stop the bleeding or something like that. And we could do that, say, every month. Lori talked about protection for your home. We could do that some month. And would you be interested in that? Would you raise your hand? Yes? All right, good. Well, we'll be in touch with you. And we'll do something like that because this is all important, and the more we all know, the better we'll all be about it all. So thank you all, and tell your friends, and check the website. And if you want to join the Morgan County Emergency Communications Network, let us know.